Mergers and acquisitions transactions are really about people, not about the assets, not about the product lines, not about the market, but really about the people involved in the transaction. If you want to complete a deal, you better understand who's lying, who's telling the truth, who's ready to cave, who's got a strong hand, who's going to be good at running the business, who's not going to be good at running the business. When your client is uncomfortable, when you need to perk them up and when you need to calm them down. All of these people skills will make you invaluable in doing your job. It's surprising how many of our experts really focused on the people side of deal making, but I'll let you listen to their perspective.
Really don't forget that good deals are made between people, not by our process or by, the perfect document, but it really is the triumph of, two parties or two individuals coming together to agree to do something collaborative in a business sense. And at its core, everything else is there to support that partnership.
M&A transactions are difficult often because they're just they're just dramatic swings between the outcomes. Either sometimes nothing happens, and other times people's lives get uprooted. Your company goes from one kind of culture to another. There need to be synergies taken out. The company can either execute on a strategy that it was planning or it can't. So big swings, so lots of tension is involved in trying to get an outcome that will suit your company, make its strategy more achievable. So, and of course, there are important, sort of human tensions that get involved here. So, sometimes for an executive team, it means, whether you're going to continue to run a business or not. It might mean a whole change in your whole lifestyle. And when you put, tough, sort of big personalities in a room on sort of a highly competitive, contentious nature of how do we value a transaction? Is it the right one? Is this the right partner? All those things get magnified. People working late, bad food in a conference room for too long. There's a whole lot of sort of reasons why human beings, get tense in a situation like that.
I think people ignore the human element, the human consequences, and just the human engagement involved in it. And you can really separate it into two parts. First, on the negotiating part, why can that be difficult? Well, because when these deals are announced, it's typically, especially if it's a large deal, which makes it more difficult, with great fanfare and everybody smiling in the press conference. And but the problem is that there are often differences of view in what we're trying to accomplish, both internally within a company, right? Because companies don't just speak completely with one voice, ultimately speak with the voice of the CEO, but that doesn't mean that there aren't people with different views beneath the surface. And then, of course, with the other company, whether you're acquiring that company, whether it's a merger of equals, there can be very different views once the negotiating starts about what we're really trying to accomplish here. You can immediately have a lot of ego and a lot of defensiveness that gets injected into the process. Why? Well, let's say you may be merging with a competitor. And by the way, you've taught your people to hate your competitor for how many years? And now we're all going to be one happy family. And especially if it's not a merger of equals. So suppose you're acquiring another company and they've not been doing so well lately. So you have to think about those sort of human elements. There's a lot of uncertainty for employees. Everybody asks the question, everyone, what does this mean for me? Don't ever let them tell you they don't ask that question. There's nothing wrong with asking that question, but that is what people want to know. So there's a lot of uncertainty. What does this mean? And so that can cause anxiety, can make it harder for people to focus on doing the job. What most people aren't involved in the deal work. They're involved in keeping the companies running. So how do they do that without distraction? And so those are some of the difficulties, I would say, at the front end. At the back end, wow, there are typically winners and losers. I mean, people who don't want to be acquired, people who don't want to merge, people who are very happy, people who are going to get promoted, people who are not, people who might lose their jobs. So to not think about all of this, and I don't mean just think about it in a technical, clinical, count heads kind of way, but to think about what this means for the culture. Because, and this I think is a really important point, you have to be thinking from the beginning about how are you going to integrate these companies. I mean, negotiating a deal is a very important first step, but it is nothing compared to what comes after that when you're trying to integrate companies together and make this deal successful, because else why did we do this in the first place? And so you have to be, I think, very conscious and have the right people in place who have this sensitivity to what are people thinking and how are we going to make sure we have the right team going forward and that they're motivated to do what we've brought this group together to do.
In terms of handling emotion, I think that I rarely have seen cases in my career where amped up emotion has been a successful, or anger, or throwing ashtrays, as somebody I did a deal with a long, long time ago was known for doing, was helpful. And I have admired and emulated people who come at transactions with equanimity, know that some of them work and some of them don't, know precisely what they need and how to trade. The most effective advisors in my career have always been the ones who are the most even-handed, the most capable of taking what, even an impassioned opponent, if you like, if I can call it that, counterpart, attorney on the other side, and calming them down and respecting what they have to say, absorbing what they have to say, and being acutely aware of what, our lawyer's client principal is interested in achieving.
I've seen some really great characters get deals done, and they all had widely different personalities. Some are, just gentlemanly, never raise their voice. Others, strategically raise their voice. And some are just, I got to raise my voice just because I'm in the room for too long.
One of my most memorable stories was a deal in Chicago where we were sitting negotiating the reps and warranties of an acquisition agreement. And the client that I was with was looking at the lawyer from a very large firm who, when my client was talking, the lawyer, his mouth was moving. And he was clearly formulating his thoughts without listening to what my client was actually saying. And the client kind of came across the table and said, "Stop planning what you're saying before you listen to me. Let's take a break." That was you. And it was a wonderful moment because it really made that lawyer realized that he wasn't listening. It was dramatic. We took a break, we came back, and we actually had some productive meetings after that. But I learned a lot from that moment.
I think it was more with Phil. It was his personality, his ability to negotiate. He never lost his temper. He never would do anything to denigrate anyone. He was very professional, but always had his eye on the ball. He knew what we needed to do. And he was also, our CEO trusted him totally. And I, in the team, the lawyers I had working with him, we all understood what we needed to do. We need to get these deals done.
By far, I would say the person that I most admired and I thought did the overall best job of counseling and shepherding transactions through was a gentleman by the name of Raj Cohen, who was he ultimately ran Sullivan and Cromwell. He built great relationships. He took the time to build relationships with every single person he met along the way in his entire career. And so by doing that, I think he became extremely knowledgeable in the business of his clients. I think he he built great relationships with other members of the professional community that serve the M&A roles. So when you were in a transaction and times got tough or there was a misunderstanding, he had relationships, deep relationships that he could then lean on to explain there had been a miscommunication, there had been a misunderstanding, there had been a hiccup, there had been a whatever, and that inured to his client's benefit. But the most important thing he did is he listened. He listened way more than he spoke. But I assure you, when he did speak, everybody listened. He listened and listened, and he was a tireless advocate for his client. And if you have spent the time over days, months, years, decades, building a relationship with your client, you know him, you know his board, you know his or her team, you know the buttons that can be pushed, you know all these things before you even start the transaction. And it makes you an incredibly effective counselor to your client. And the difference between being a deal maker and a counselor is small at the margin maybe, but it's huge for ultimate success of a client. It really is.
I would become a student of human behavior. And you're going to get that in all organizations you belong to, in your social interactions, understanding people, how to interact, how to communicate, how to put yourself in their shoes, and then just how to be human. If I could just tell one small story from that, we were doing we were making a large divestiture at P&G several years ago, and it was in the food business, and we had made the strategic decision to completely get out of this business, and this was our last divestiture in it, and it was big. And while we were going along quite nicely, we thought, with our deal terms and so forth, we learned that the SEC was investigating the acquiring company's CEO and CFO for accounting irregularities. So we dug in and we tried to figure out what was going on, and it wasn't good. Whether or not there was truth to the allegations, the SEC wasn't going to go away. So I'm just very proud of what we did. We didn't immediately panic. We didn't go public. We very quietly gathered the facts, considered them carefully, determined it was a serious investigation, and then we told the company that we had made the decision that we were going to terminate the deal. And we very quietly approached another company who we knew was interested, told them we were interested in selling it to them, as long as they could tell their lawyers that we were going to do it quickly or not at all, which ended up happening. But the part that I'm actually quite proud of, we talked for quite some time about whether we should take legal action against this company. And what we concluded was that for these folks, their professional life was in shambles. Their company was being hit very hard, and there was no need for us to pile on. We used our deal documents as much as we could and repurposed them with the other company, and we moved forward, and we moved forward quickly. And I'm just very proud of that, because some people say, well, you're crazy. You were the lead lawyer. Why on earth were you not going after them? Well, because we made the decision that we needed to move on, that they needed to move on, that moving on separately was the right way to do it. And from a human perspective, we just didn't need to pile on. So people could perhaps disagree with that, but we ultimately concluded that even for the shareholders, that was the best way to go.